Marla arrived in Washington in 2002. She just returned from her first trip to Afghanistan. It was just after the fall of the Taliban. In Afghanistan, she'd met the families of innocent civilians who'd been killed by mistake in U.S. bombing raids, and she saw, not only with that tragedy, she saw that nothing was being done at that time to help them. Now, being Marla, and her parents would know what this means, she's just 25 years old. She's never been to Afghanistan before. She didn't speak the language, but she knew how to do what she did best. What's that? She organized a demonstration outside the U.S. Embassy with those families. She also got a picture in the New York Times. She knew what she was doing. And a few weeks later, she contacted Tim Reeser, my valued right-hand man in this regard, and told Tim, and probably the best person to meet, Tim helped us arrange this today. And then she walked into my office. You knew when she was in your office, let me tell you. This was not a shy person. She was on a mission. Now here's some of the chuckles. I guess a lot of you know knew her. She opened the eyes of the world. But what was remarkable, and others here are going to say more about this, is her ability to go from protesting to winning the hearts and admirations of politicians, of hardened U.S. military officers of experience, and sometimes jaded war correspondents, and anyone else who could help the families of innocent war victims. It was, as she said herself, and think of this, what she was doing, she said, this is the American thing to do. It was the patriotic thing to do. In fact, Marla Ruzicka was the real U.S. Patriot Act. But let me tell you a story. Now think of Marla. She's 5 feet 3 inches. Think of Secretary Don Rumsfeld, a man who travels in armored cars, as he should, in special airplanes to counter any terrorist attack, in a hardened office and with security all around. Now think of the Secretary finishing his testimony before the Congress and pick up his papers, and the entourage moves around, and all of a sudden comes this blonde missile through the crowd. It's Marla, and she wants to talk to him. And he starts talking. Secretary gets up, starts to leave the room. Doesn't bother Marla. She keeps after him. He starts down the marbled halls. The entourage is picking up speed. So is Marla. Follows him right down to the armored car. And she makes her point. She makes her point. Not speaking for Marla, but speaking for innocent civilians. As Neil's film point. In fact, Neil, where are you? You see? Neil, stand up. You deserve a hand. As Marla's life said, and as Neil's film so adequately points out, a century ago, 90% of the casualties in war were combatants. Now 90% of them are civilians. And Marla saw that this reality was too often ignored by all governments, including her own. And it was unacceptable to her. Let me tell you, my friends, it should be unacceptable to every single person in this room. The programs that Congress created and funded because Marla risked her life to bring to our attention the suffering of innocent Afghans and Iraqis, these programs are unprecedented in the history of this country. For the first time, we are officially acknowledging in law, our responsibility to help innocent victims and their families put their lives back together. If you want to think of legacies, think of that. But beyond this, we've also recognized, thanks to Marla's tenaciousness, that civilian casualties need to be counted. Only by doing so can we know the true cost of war, and we can properly dignify and honor each person killed or wounded as an individual, as a father, a son, a daughter, a mother, not just as collateral damage. And that's Marla's legacy. She has changed at 28 years old. She has changed the way that our government responds to the often neglected tragedies of war. Now all of us have to build on what she accomplished. And people ask me, how are you going to replace Marla? Well, we can't. We can't. We all know that. Not with one person. She was one of a kind. For those who knew her and loved her, accepting that is especially painful. Every time a car bomb explodes in Iraq today and I see the photographs of the casualties, like so many of you, I think of Marla. Because if she were there, she'd be helping these people. But she left us an extraordinary gift. And that's the multitudes of people around the globe who have been inspired by her passion, her courage, her irrepressible spirit, her enormous heart to continue her campaign for innocent victims of conflict. As Marcel and I know, my wife Marcel and I know, we got that call early in the morning. And that day, all day long, the phones in our home never stopped ringing. From people from Baghdad, from Afghanistan, from California, from Washington, from around the world, who just wanted to talk about her. And I pledged that we would keep on working. I pledged that we would do this together. And we are. In that regard, I've been helped so much by the senators from California. And I'd like to introduce my dear friend, Senator Dianne Feinstein.